Loving thy neighbour is easier said than done.
If he was a slug, I would put salt round him so he explodes.
They nearly got me arrested.
That's the type of noise we have to put up with.
When the garden fence marks enemy lines.
Have you got your recorder on?
That's right.
Really?
Your home life can turn into a living hell.
Give me my dog!
What do you mean, you?
What the hell's wrong with you?
Coming up, wheelie bin wars turn nasty.
They were trying to cause trouble.
I thought it was very petty and childish.
Noise sparks off a war between two families.
I'm like a nervous wreck.
And ends in violence.
He's pushed Neighbour to the point where he just wants to beat him up.
And one man is driven out of his neighbourhood.
Police, police are being intimidated by my neighbours.
In a small mining village in South Wales lives 21-year-old Paige Jones.
This is Aberdeen. I've been brought up here and this is where I'm living. It's a very nice area. The community is friendly and everybody gets along.
Paige lives with her 3-year-old son in a house that has been in her family for 3 generations.
I'm very comfortable living in this house. My nan was brought up in this house.
And her father Gary lives nearby.
Me and my father get along really well. Not only is he my father, he's like my best friend. When we see one of us, there's another one always chasing behind.
4 years ago, Paige got some new neighbours. Joanne Dowling and her children. Joanne has agreed to speak to us, but has asked not to be shown.
When I first moved in, I thought it was a quiet street and that people were friendly. I never really had much to do with Paige at all. She's a very shy person. I don't think she bothered with many neighbours in a friendly way.
For 3 years, the neighbours didn't speak to each other. But one day, something very unfriendly happened that forced them to talk.
I'd been out on a Friday night for a few drinks, got back to the house about 8 o'clock in the morning. So I walked from the car, which was parked down there, up to the house, only to find my front door kicked in.
I was down my mother's and I received a phone call off my father early in the morning. I said, "Dad, what's wrong?" And I could tell by his voice he was very angry. And then he described to me then that his front door had been put in.
The large footprint on there, fingerprints all over the door.
This front panel here was kicked in so far, I could see all the way up the stairs. I was very shocked because it's been kicked with a lot of force.
The Jones were at a loss to explain why this had happened. Could it have been a burglary, a drunken local, or something more personal?
No idea who could have done it. The street has been so quiet over the years, and obviously to see that is rare for you.
Suspicion soon fell on the newcomer, Joanne.
I checked Joanne's Facebook account on that day and she had put a status saying, "Party with the big boys."
Paige put 2 and 2 together and decided the damage must have been done by drunken party guests.
My father knocked her door to say, "Did you have a party here?" And she denied it. My father said, "Well, how come it says on Facebook?" But she denied having any party whatsoever.
I had 2 guests here. We drank 2 bottles of wine between the 3 of us, and I watched them leave here that night to go and get a taxi at the end of the street. It was nothing to do with us at all. Just absolute rubbish. Absolute rubbish.
And that wasn't the only rubbish Joanne thought was coming from her neighbours, because she had her own complaints about them.
The bin was being put out and being left out 7 days a week in the curb directly outside my house. It was stopping me from parking outside my house, and Paige was able to park her car outside her house with no obstruction.
Gary does in fact leave the bins on the road. He has good reasons.
I used to leave the wheelie bin up against the wall by her, but it was causing damage and it's taking the paint away. So I decided then, rather than leave it where you're to cause more damage, I'd put it in the corner here. No one uses that, no one parks here, so I thought it'd be out everyone's way, really.
Paige's bin was taking up the parking space. and I would move the bin back outside of Paige's house and pull my car in. The next morning I'd get up and the bin would be jammed up against my car.
A number of times I woke up to take my son to school. I've opened the front door here. As I stepped out, and basically we're on top of the wheelie bin, as the bin has been placed on the doorstep here.
To stop Joanne moving their wheelie bin back outside their house, Paige resorted to a new tactic.
I woke up one morning and my daughter said to me, "You'll never guess what they've done to their bin. Come and have a look." They had covered the bin in thick builder's grease with a sign on it saying, "Do not touch."
The grease was put on the wheelie bin handles to stop the bin being moved from the road, and the sign was put on the bin to say hands off, so you know not to touch. Basically that's it.
If it had got onto my children's clothing, or if I had brushed up against it or my car, it would have been very difficult to have removed. They were trying to antagonise me. They were trying to upset me. They were trying to cause trouble.
But this bin war was only just beginning. Coming up, complaints about loud music lead to violence.
I was so scared because I'd been home alone. I didn't know what he was going to do next.
And a car obsessive drives his neighbours mad.
There's a banging on the door and he gets his hands and pushes me back really violently.
Sometimes arguments between neighbours can be over in a flash, but others can burn on and on. In the West Midlands, the Sang family have been at war for 6 years.
Jamie! I can hear some music!
Since a noisy neighbour
What, you can see him?
Actually red.
tipped them over the edge.
Yeah, the whole family just feel anxious and frustrated.
He's pushed Nathan to the point where he just wants to beat him up.
Margaret, can we watch something nice, or maybe a horror film? Divorced mom, Adele.
Nathan and Susan Sang live with their 2 sons, 18-year-old Kieran
I want to watch something nice.
and 19-year-old Jamie in Tipton in the West Midlands.
Annabelle?
Annabelle's not nice.
Annabelle's nice? All you see is like a doll moving about, killing people.
When the dispute with their neighbours began, the family were dealing with their own problems.
I give up blood pressure. About 6 years ago, my kidney deteriorated and my consultant said that I will need a kidney transplant.
She began getting weak, she couldn't do things on her own. It was pretty heartbreaking because obviously it's your mum, you never want to see her like that.
With Susan in need of a donor, husband Nathan immediately stepped forward.
I mean, at the beginning, when he wanted to give me a kidney, I was very hesitant because I didn't want someone to risk their lives for me. It was a success. My kidney just started working straight away.
When they returned home from hospital, what Susan and Nathan needed was peace and quiet and lots of sleep. But that wasn't exactly what they got.
It was 7 o'clock in the morning, and then suddenly we just hear some banging noise.
Oh God, it was bang, 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 and the radio was on.
It was really loud, even with all the window and door shut. I was so annoyed. I just get up myself and see what's going on outside.
Concerned that Susan, who was resting in bed, would be unable to get any much-needed sleep, Nathan decided he had to say something.
I see the next door neighbour out there in his back garden doing the groundwork with a radio next to him, and I tried to tell him can you turn the music down a bit?
But his neighbour, Balbinder Singh, had his own ideas.
He came back yelling at me, very, very, very aggressively.
He goes, come down here and have a fight with me. That's what he said to Nathan.
I was really shocked, so I just shut the window.
But Mr. Singh wasn't the Sang's only problem, because his grown-up son Nick liked even louder music.
The first time when we heard a little bit of music, yeah, like a little beat.
While you were in bed?
Yeah, about 11 o'clock at night. And I thought, oh God, where's it coming from? So I come out onto the landing, and that's when I felt the vibration on the floor. It never really worried me, because, you know, you just think it might be just a one-off.
But it happened again. And again, and again.
The music's that loud. It was like having a big disco in your house, yeah.
I just felt like going out and telling him, turn down your music.
And we had all the windows changed because of him. We thought, you know, if we have triple glazing, it might help a little bit as well. But we can still hear it.
The family wanted to resolve things amicably and tried to speak to Nick on several occasions.
I was trying to be friendly with him. You don't follow your neighbours, do you? Do you know what I mean?
The Sangs say there was no let-up in the noise.
It was just putting so much strain on us, and it was to that point where most of the whole family had just like fallen out.
We approached Nick and asked him for his version of events. He told us that whilst he does enjoy listening to music, he doesn't think it's too loud. And in April 2014, he asked Susan to go round and discuss the issue, face to face.
We were talking for about 2 hours. He goes, I'm really, really sorry for putting you through all that stress and you having your kidney problems and all that. And when I left his house, I really thought that, you know, everything should be all right. I was really hopeful.
But before long, Nick's dad would ensure her high hopes would come crashing down.
He was that drunk. He was like wobbling all over the place, just screaming and yelling. So what I'd done was, I was so scared being home alone, called the police. You know, I didn't know what he was going to do next.
In Wales, Paige and Gary Jones were locked in a bitter feud with their neighbour, Joanne Dowling, over the positioning of their bin in the road outside her house.
I felt it was very unfair for her to obstruct my part of the highway.
The Joneses' wheelie bin was moved around the street for about 8 months before the council intervened.
All of a sudden, we had a letter from the council saying no one is allowed to leave a bin on the pavement or the road until the day your rubbish had to be collected. So we need to move the bins in, otherwise we'd be fined.
But this new arrangement didn't suit the Joneses.
My father weren't willing to put the wheelie bins through the house due to unclean carpet, which meant our wheelie bin got taken away. In result of that, we've had to store our food and rubbish in the kitchen. I'm not happy about that because my son's only 3 and what happens if he falls and cuts himself on a tin?
With the rubbish piling up in the kitchen, the Joneses felt there was only one place to put their overflow.
I went to bring my bin in and noticed that the bin felt a bit heavy and the lid was open slightly.
My sister and I just came back from clean up from my brother's birthday party. My sister still had the birthday cake. Because no longer us having a wheelie bin, my sister used Joanne's wheelie bin next door.
I opened up the bin and noticed inside there was a silver cake tray with a cake on it. So I thought, it's not my cake and I know whose cake it is, so I put it on her doorstep.
I seen the cake had been placed back on the doorstep. I thought it was very petty and childish, as I don't see no harm in using someone's wheelie bin to dispose of a cake.
Paige's stepsister Layla had left the cake in Joanne's bin, so Paige got straight on the phone to her.
I said the cake had been put back on the doorstep. My sister then came over and knocked Joanne's door to see what the problem was in using her wheelie bin.
Paige's sister was very aggressive. I opened the door and received a tyrant of screaming abuse.
They had a few words. My sister then put the cake down by this blue arrow here.
Paige's stepsister kicked the cake at my house. I picked up the cake and threw the cake back to them.
As I closed the door, I heard a thud. Went all over the wall here and still marked.
I didn't want the cake outside the front of my property. It was their cake. They were having it back.
Paige's sister declined to comment on these events, but the cake was just the start of more serious problems. In the quiet Suffolk village of Little Waldingfield, one man has unwittingly become notorious.
Don't know him.
Ian Parker began renting a home in the village with his wife and 3 children 7 years ago.
Lovely little village. Everybody would speak to you. We were very happy. Got on with everybody and we were most welcome.
But since he arrived, Ian's certainly made an impression on the neighbours.
Ian's friendly to your face, but he's a troublemaker.
He's just got a bit of a reputation as a sort of loose cannon, as somebody who you wouldn't really want to have living next door to you or in your village.
But Ian was oblivious to what others thought of him and settled into his routine driving to and from work every day.
As I was indicating to pull into the driveway, which was a shared driveway at the time, this car, 2 cars behind us, speeding past them, overtaking, and to avoid him hitting me, I have to drive into the driveway quickly.
It had been a close shave, but Ian thought it was the end of the matter.
I turned the kettle on, and there's a banging on the door, surprise, you know, and so I go back out.
It was Ian's next-door neighbour, and it was clear from the banging something was wrong.
I open the door, and he barges in, and he gets his hands and pushes me back really violently, and I fall to the floor. And starts shouting at me, "What you coming on the driveway like that for?" And so I got up, and I grab his collar, twist it, and I push him back out through the door. I said, "Don't you dare come to my bloody house like that." And he walks off with his tail between his legs.
It was clear his next-door neighbour was upset by his speedy arrival into the drive.
I'd done nothing to warrant a response like that.
But one of Ian's other neighbours, who doesn't want to be identified, claims he's got form.
He's had a couple of incidents in the street where he's had an altercation with another driver. He's spun his car around, wheels screeching in the road, and he would speed in the village. But that's just a matter of opinion. But I'd say he drives too fast.
Ian insists he's a safe driver and has his suspicions his neighbour was unhappy with something else.
He didn't like the fact that we had a shared drive, and he wanted his own driveway and me to have my own driveway.
Ian may have been right, as shortly afterwards the landlord decided to put up a fence splitting the drive in 2. But Ian had his own worries.
My wife left me. I was pretty down, as you can imagine. So I didn't need any more aggravation, hostility. Certainly didn't need hostility.
Ian tried to distract himself by focusing on his hobby.
This is my pride and joy, my Chrysler.
But then he started noticing problems with his cars.
And as I walked round this side of the car, I noticed there was a large spatter of mud here. It couldn't have happened while I was driving because the spatter itself was directly down. I immediately looked at my other vehicles and noticed the stone chip on my Transit. And on closer inspection, found more scratches down the other side of my van. And discovered this chip here.
Ian was convinced someone had a grudge against him.
I was very upset about that. You know, I felt obviously that was just a blatant attack on my property. So I phoned the police.
With no evidence as to the possible culprit, the police could do nothing. So Ian decided to take action to see if anyone was coming near his beloved cars.
I installed cameras front and back of the house.
Ian soon became a one-man surveillance machine.
I bought a torch cam, visible clip-on cameras, a toy cam, several button cams. So all my cars have car cams in. Probably spent about £500 to £700. I thought, well, I'm going to have to get evidence.
Coming up, the Sangs find peace doesn't last for long.
His dad came out of the house and started screaming and yelling and looked up at me.
And Paige Jones's dad fights back.
He wouldn't touch a woman or hurt a woman.
In the West Midlands, Susan Sang had suffered noisy neighbours ever since her kidney transplant 6 years ago. Nick Singh, who lived next door, had apologised, and Susan enjoyed peace and quiet for 2 weeks. But that tranquility was broken one day when she was home alone.
All of a sudden I heard this loud music coming into the house. So I rushed into the bathroom, I looked out the window, and all of a sudden his dad came out of the house and started screaming and yelling and looked up at me. He was that drunk, he was like wobbling all over the place. So what I'd done was I was so scared because being home alone, I quickly went and picked up the phone and called the police. I didn't know what he was going to do next.
While waiting for the police to arrive, Susan spotted another neighbour in the street and asked him to try and calm Nick's dad down.
And next thing I know, they were screaming and yelling and, Nick's dad was just going mad. And then Nick's dad went onto the middle of the road over there and he stood there with his 2 arms outstretched and told him to run him over. It's just horrible,
The other neighbour continued to try and calm Balbinder down until the police finally arrived.
Next thing we know, he says something like bastard. And then the police put the handcuffs on him and put him in the police car and then took him away.
Balbinder was arrested for being drunk and disorderly. The next day, he was given a fixed penalty notice and released. But the Sangs hoped his brush with the law would finally keep him and Nick quiet, giving Susan the peace she needed to recover from her kidney transplant.
Oh, what is it?
36.4.
But 6 years of worrying about next door was beginning to take its toll on Susan.
I'm dreading it. Don't know whether he's going to put his bloody music on again. I wouldn't say a little bit taking over my life. I would say it's completely taken over my life. I can't even sit down, can't even do nothing. As soon as this music comes on, I'm like a nervous wreck. Jimmy, come out, I can hear something.
That was when my mum was starting to actually get kind of, not crazy, but more insane over it.
All I hear is wind. You okay, Mum?
It's always in my mind. As soon as I wake up, as soon as I go to sleep, even during the day, I have this thought in my head thinking, oh my God, is it ever gonna end?
So Susan took her complaints to the council, who provided her with noise monitors to record the levels of sound coming from next door.
That week I recorded it and they said there was enough evidence to serve a notice. It was that loud.
The council served Nick with a noise abatement notice, warning him that if he continued playing loud music, he could receive a fine. But Susan claims that within weeks, the problems had started up again.
I heard all this music coming through in my kitchen while I was cooking. I couldn't keep my coat on and I went over. And I was knocking and knocking for about 5 minutes. And I thought, well, it's not going to come now, is he? Because he can't even hear me knocking, maybe. So I thought I'll go home.
But Susan's banging hadn't gone unnoticed. 2 weeks later, she and Nathan were having dinner when they were interrupted.
Someone knocked on the door really hard, and it's like, just keep going until I answer the door. I was worried. He was quite aggressive.
The man at the door said he was a member of Nick Singh's family. He was angry that Susan had broken the door with her banging.
He goes, do you want trouble? He said to me. Nathan was about to go up and beat him up. But I said, no, don't go up there.
I said to him, if you not move, I'll call the police. And I just slammed the door.
It's not nice to be threatened. I was scared. What if they tried to do something? Do you know what I mean? It was horrible.
When we spoke to Nick and his family, they collectively decided not to take part in this film, and Nick didn't comment on this incident either. But Susan and Nathan had had enough. One more run-in with their neighbour would finally tip them over the edge.
We've given him so many opportunities to change his ways. We're not being jokey with him, we're not playing around, we're being serious.
In Wales, a row between the Joneses and their neighbour Joanne Dowling over the disposal of a birthday cake in the wrong bin had resulted in them hitting the headlines.
I was so upset because I didn't see a problem in using a wheelie bin, as everybody's entitled to use a bin to dispose of any rubbish. Everybody knows me as Quiet Paige, and I didn't put a cake in a bin to cause any trouble.
Joanne called the police, and Paige was ordered to clear the cake up. But it wouldn't end there.
On the Sunday morning, my father went to Joe's house just to say enough's enough.
As I opened the door, Gary lunged towards me. He scrammed all my neck. He ripped my top open and was trying to push me into the living room. I was screaming for him to get out. His words were inaudible. He had been drinking heavily, could smell it on him. My boyfriend got up and he came running down the stairs. "Come on then, I'll take the lot of you on." I was in the middle of it. I was the one that got kicked.
It was a serious allegation, and one that Gary didn't want to talk to us about.
He got arrested. I didn't approve of the way he got handled or spoken to, as it was out of order.
Gary was arrested for common assault and was released on bail, but not allowed to return to the street.
He wouldn't touch a woman or hurt a woman, and everybody we've spoken to has said, no way would you have done such a thing. There was no hard evidence against my father.
In court, the assault charge was dropped, but Gary did plead guilty to threatening behaviour, a public order offence.
He had a 10-week curfew, which means he has to wear a tag for 10 weeks. And also I've got a 3-year restraining order.
Gary didn't want to speak to us about the events in Joanne's house that day, but he did say he found the punishment very harsh. As part of the order, he has to stay in his own home between the hours of 9 p.m. to 8 a.m, limiting his time with Paige and her son.
He's got to sleep elsewhere, which has really gone hard on me and my father, as we're always together, and after all this we've been parted and we feel like we've lost limbs.
It needn't have gone this far. It's over a wheelie bin and a birthday cake. A very, very petty squabble.
But the war is far from over.
My wing mirror has been ripped off I don't know how many times. I have thought of moving in the not too distant future.
In Suffolk, neighbours of car enthusiast Ian Parker were far less enthusiastic about his collection of vehicles. Believing someone was trying to tamper with them, Ian had set up cameras.
I started to find screws strewn across in front of me van and my cars. In my back garden, I found broken glass.
However, Ian wasn't able to find any evidence on his CCTV footage.
And then I started doing some maintenance on my van and cut my hand on the fence. Started bleeding straight away, profusely. That was when I noticed the screws protruding through the wood that hadn't been there previously. Despite all my efforts, I was holding it up, I was putting pressure on it. I couldn't stem the flow of blood, so I called a paramedic.
The paramedic managed to stop the bleeding, and although he had no evidence, Ian was convinced the screws had been placed there deliberately. Ian checked his CCTV again and again and again, but there was no footage of anything untoward happening on his driveway. Then, one day, the cameras captured something. It was Ian himself with a friend working on his classic car.
I received a letter from the council It said that there'd been complaints about excessive smoke pollution and excessive revving of car engines for over an hour and a half at a time. I started my car. Obviously, it's trying to burn off excessive brake fluid in the carburetors. And of course, consequently, you get white smoke. You could see clearly my friend and I thought it was, you know, humorous.
Ian was convinced he'd done nothing wrong, so he invited an environmental health officer round to view the footage.
And, we had a nice chat, and I said, well, for starters, as a classic car, I will not rev the engine in a classic car. He viewed the footage, and he asked me, he said, is this the only time this happened? And I said, yeah. And he recorded it as just a tad over 20 minutes.
The council took no action, but warned Ian that if the complaints continued, then he would be monitored. But it wasn't just engine noise that was bothering the neighbours.
A lot of heavy bass is played, mainly in his car. He'll have the windows open and it'll be blaring full pelt. It's like you get the boom, 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 that sort of music. You can hear it sort of down the road from where he lives. It is very loud, and it's done to upset one neighbour in particularly.
And it wasn't just the close neighbours who were affected.
He's been a noise nuisance to several of his neighbours, playing loud, heavy metal music out of his house with the windows open at all hours.
Ian's landlord soon heard about the neighbourly disputes.
I wouldn't want him as a direct neighbour for the aggro that he gives the people around him, the noise, the intimidation.
It must be a nightmare living next door to somebody like that.
Following complaints, Ian received a warning that if problems continued, he could be evicted.
Unfortunately, my landlord, he's not given me benefit of the doubt, basically sided with my neighbours.
But Ian started to get really worried when attention seemed to turn to his parents, whose house was nearby.
I was unloading my shopping from the back of my car, putting it in the porch, and they stopped and leaned on my little gate, cursing at me. And they moved into my big gate and again gave me verbal abuse, shaking a fist, giving me the peace sign, you know. And I just don't understand why.
Really unsettled my father. I ended up taking him to the police station where he made a very emotional statement, and the police were extremely concerned that now that these people were now targeting my family.
The police spoke to the culprits about the incident, but no action was taken. A few days later, Keith claims they became the target of more than just nasty words.
Came out to get in my car, and lying down here was a bag of dog poo that had been thrown at me dining room windows. The police were informed again, and I cleared the mess up, and that was it. Nothing more heard about it.
So many times I'd had the police say it was your word against theirs, and I thought, well, you know, they're going to trip up at some point.
Desperate to catch the culprits in the act, Ian decided to take radical action.
I've bought several personal cameras to wear on my person. I bought a torch cam, visible clip-on cameras, got a tie cam, several button cams. Then in my vehicles, all my cars have car cams in.
And soon, those cameras would capture one of his neighbours.
It was an act of aggression.
Coming up, the war in Wales rages on.
This tyre had been cut and it was flat as a pancake.
And the Sangs fight back.
He came limping over and asked me to tell me to stop beating him up. That's when I said to him that, you know, it's his own fault.
In Wales, Paige Jones's father Gary had been convicted of threatening behaviour to his neighbour Joanne Dowling. But that had not been the end of things.
I've had what I assume to be dog mess on my front door.
This tyre had been cut and it was flat as a pancake.
My car's constantly scratched.
And the distance between her car and my car was no thicker than my wrist.
And my wing mirror has been ripped off I don't know how many times.
Joanne has denied everything Paige has accused her of. Paige has so far not responded to Joanne's allegations.
I have thought of moving, to be honest with you.
We have sat down and talked about selling up and moving elsewhere, but on the other hand we think, why should we move out?
I don't think I'm the neighbour from hell at all, or a difficult person to live next to. I just want a quiet life with my children.
They are the newcomers. We've been in the street all our life. Everybody knows us and gets along with us, so we shouldn't move.
In Suffolk, Ian Parker was so determined to prove he was in fact the victim of intimidation from his neighbours that he kept his car cams running whenever he left the house.
I was travelling from my parents' house about 1.5 miles up the road.
There was a car travelling behind Ian's.
They were really up close behind me, tailgating, so I was very cautious. And coming up to the roundabout, I noticed that he was indicating left to go towards Colchester. But as I turned to go to Sudbury, he suddenly turned and overtook the other side of the bollard and he cut in front of me. I was shocked at how close he'd come. It was just reckless. It was an act of aggression. I think it just shows that he's caught up in some personal hatred.
But when Ian showed his video to the police, they decided not to investigate the incident. One of Ian's neighbours, however, insists Ian has always been the problem.
There was one evening when I was watching television, and over the sound of the television, I heard the screeching of tyres, and a vehicle obviously was spinning around in the street. Looked out the window and saw that Ian had driven his vehicle at speed and lost control and ran through a neighbour's fence.
Ian admits that he backed into his neighbour's fence, but says it was an accident and he paid for the damage. He insists his neighbours will look for any reason to complain about him. But by May 2014, Ian had been trying to gather evidence that he was not the aggressor when he spotted the neighbour next door over the fence.
So I was out in my back garden and I just happened to glance in the corner of my eye. I caught him with his camcorder, so I carefully turned on my button cam.
You're filming me. You're filming me. Bully. Bullies.
And I walk into the house to phone the police.
Yeah, police, I think. I'm being intimidated by my neighbours.
Following a police visit, both Ian and his next-door neighbour agreed not to approach or make any contact with each other. But for Ian's landlord, the problems had gone on long enough.
In summer of 2014, it all came to a head, and unfortunately I was forcibly evicted from my home.
Ian refused to be driven out of the village completely, so now lives with his parents round the corner. But for them, the nightmare is ongoing.
It's happened on 8 occasions in the last 11 months that we've been abused, and the last occasion they called Rita and me. And
we haven't done anything to provoke them into doing what they're doing.
I just don't understand why it's still carrying on. I think they're sick in the head.
I was a good neighbour. I'd do anything for anybody, but some people just seem to forget
that we all have to live together.
In the West Midlands, life for the Sang family was becoming unbearable as the problem of loud music from next door got worse.
The police come out, the council served him a notice. We've had a friendly chat, we've had rows with him. He's just not listening to anybody. And it just got to the point where I'm thinking nobody can help us.
And one evening in November 2014, simmering tensions with her neighbour Nick Singh finally reached boiling point.
Around 8 o'clock, I heard the music come on.
My mum said she's had enough. When your dad comes home, you're going straight out to tell him to stop.
Just wanted it sorting out then and then.
I got back from work about 9:10. Susan came up to me and looked really upset.
So Nathan and the kids got all the, the kids got the hoodies on and everything, and they went over.
I kept banging and banging onto his door for a few minutes.
Me and my dad were swearing like mad, saying, open the damn door.
I'm just getting angry and angrier. It's just up to the level where enough is enough.
And then about maybe 5-10 minutes later, he actually comes out.
I told him, turn the music off, it's really loud. And then he tried to push me away.
And that's when my dad actually took it to the next level.
And I retaliated. I just grabbed off him.
Fists were being thrown around.
Then he slapped onto Kieran's face.
He literally hit me here. It didn't hurt. I mean, I felt it didn't hurt. So I punched him back around here.
So in the end, I just kicked him away.
He took his jacket off and said, come on then, come at me. I'll take you all on. Jamie said, okay, bring it then. We'll all take you on.
Then we all chased up to him and grappled off him.
Having heard the commotion, Susan rushed outside.
He came limping over and asked me to tell them to stop beating him up and that they can't beat him up. That's when I said to him that it's his own fault. He shouldn't have the music on so loud.
Following the fight, Nick claims he called the police. When we spoke to him, he claimed he could have had Kieran, Jamie and Nathan arrested, but decided not to press charges.
We're not violent people, but he's made us want to be like that, do you know what I mean?
Nick has told us that since the fight, he is scared to go back to his own home and that he's had to install CCTV because he feels he's being intimidated by the Sangs. And the dispute between the two households shows no sign of ending anytime soon.
I feel like he's driving me out of my own home. And I do wonder myself whether it'll ever get solved. Who knows? Yeah, I'm just hoping it will.
Have you got a nightmare neighbour story? Get in touch at channel5.com/nightmare neighbour.
Ticking crime drama acting off her list of achievements, Kim Kardashian cementing her A-list status and kicking off celeb CSI night here on Channel 5. Stay tuned to spot her in action in CSI New York. Up next.